Thank you all for coming. My name is Wong. I am currently managing the overseas operations of Indienova, which is an indie publisher in China. We are focusing on bringing the best indie games to China. And at the same time, I also run a small game studio back in Lima, in Peru. Prior to that, I used to work at NetEase, which is a AAA mobile games company in China. So I was working at the office in Guangzhou. So the idea for this talk is to try to answer some of the most frequently asked questions about China. This comes basically from speaking with developers and publishers and also with local supporters in China, but also with developers and publishers from the West that are starting to become interested in China. So the goal of this talk is to basically explain or try to show you why China is important right now, especially for indie developers. And second, that if you are interested in coming to China, like what should you consider in order to be successful there? So the first question that comes usually is, are people allowed to play games in China, right? And absolutely, like I guess that most of you already knows this, but China is actually the largest market right now in games, and this is like actually not updated because there's already the 2017 data. So yeah, China is now the largest market for games in the world, and that's basically because of the huge growth of mobile games that happened in recent years, but also because of two factors that happened in 2015. One is that finally consoles were allowed again in China because they were banned for 15 years. So if 2 years ago, Sony and Microsoft started selling again officially their consoles in China. And another important thing was that although Steam was already allowed to distribute games in China from the beginning, in 2015 they started offering local payment systems, which are basically Alipay and WeChat Wallet, which are like digital payment systems. And this is like widely spread in China. So you use these systems to buy everything in China. And the other thing was that they also started allowing payments using UnionPay, which is kind of Chinese version of Visa or MasterCard. So this, along with the explosion of mobile growth, because of the higher penetration of mobile phones, and also because people started to buy in more and more phones, helped that made that China is now the largest market in the world. So yeah, basically, people in China are allowed to play games in China. Okay, so the second question is if people in China only play free-to-play games, and of course the answer is no. The answer, yeah, like. The truth is that they mostly play free-to-play games, and that is basically because when consoles were banned for 15 years, most people only played free-to-play PC games. So after that long period of time, there was this culture of just playing free-to-play games, and that is why now in mobile, most games are using that kind of business model. But there's also a small percentage of players that are willing to experience more premium games. And because China is so big, that small percentage is a large amount of people. So we've seen this growth, especially since the release of Monument Valley. But we have also seen this with more recent titles like This War of Mine, and recently with Hidden Folks that had a huge success in China. Like I think that he got more than 30 or 40% of all their users in China. Okay, so the next question is usually if I can sell my game in China. And it's a tricky question. In theory, all games that are sold in China need to have a license number that you get from the government through a very strict process and through a process that takes a lot of time and also a lot of money in some cases. But what happens in practice, at least now, April of 2017, is that if you're interested in publishing your game on Steam in China or on the App Store in China, you can do it. Actually, Steam is right now in a kind of a gray area, but for now it's working. So if you are interested in selling your game on these platforms, you can do it. This is not the case for Chinese developers who cannot submit their games to the App Store unless they have this license number. So if you want to come into China right now, it's the best time to do it, because we don't know when will that stop. However, as some of you may know, there are also hundreds of Android stores in China, like 200 stores or 300 stores. And for most of these stores, you do need the license number from the government. And this also applies to some digital PC stores like Sonko, and also for the Tencent games platform that, well, they just announced a couple of weeks ago that they are like relaunching their platform and naming it WePlay. So if you have a PC game, for now, you can release it on Steam, but if you want to use all these other stores, you will need this license number. And for getting this license number, you should be either a Chinese company, or you should have a partner who can apply for the license for you. And that is why most developers in the West are looking for publishers that they can help you bring in their games to China. For consoles, it's also the same thing. And you need to get this license from the government in order to sell your games on PlayStation and on Xbox officially. And that is why we don't see games like Uncharted 4 or GTA in consoles. But we do see them, like GTA 5, for example, on Steam. And these are also completely separate processes. So if you have a game that will be launched on Steam, on consoles, and on mobile, you need to do 3 different processes. Another question that usually comes is what kinds of games Chinese players like the most. And although roguelikes and survival games are very popular right now in China, some more experimental games and games that have a unique art style can also do very well in China. So don't think that if your game is not of one of these genres, your game won't do all right in China. There are some more important issues to solve before than just the genre. Another question that comes is if there are local indies in China. And absolutely, like in the West, after there were more options for making games like Unity or Unreal, and there were also new channels, digital channels like the PlayStation Network, or Xbox Live, or Steam, and the App Store. Lots of people in China started to making games on their own. Most of these people also came from these very large AAA game studios from China, but also from the West, and also from these outsourcing companies that work in China. So right now we're looking at an explosion of indie games in China. These are some of the most popular games right now, I guess. This game is called Candleman and was developed by a very small team in Beijing that was released last year for Xbox One. This one is a game called Icy, which is kind of a blend between beat 'em up and the Stanley Parable. And it was hugely popular, not only in China, but also in some parts in the West. This is another great example of a Chinese indie game. It's called Lost Castle. It was developed by a small team in China and also published by a Chinese publisher in China. And it got more than 200,000 copies sold in Steam, and 95% of those sales were in China. This is another game that got a lot of attention last year. It got like $50,000 on Kickstarter, and also in the Chinese version of Kickstarter. And it's going to be released this year. And this is another indie game that is coming out soon. It's called Yesterday, and it's being developed by a trio of girls based in Beijing. Another important thing to consider in China right now is that there are also lots of events happening, like Amaze or IGF, but in China. So the biggest one is a game event called WePlay that will be held this year in Shanghai, and they also organize an award ceremony that they call Indie Play. So that's an opportunity to give awards to the best games that are being made in China and also to foster the community there. Apart from that, there are also like more smaller events like Indie Arcade, which is like an event that happens all over China, basically in the main cities in China like Guangzhou, Beijing, Shanghai, but also in Shenzhen and Xiamen. And basically it's a showcase opportunity for most of these local games. Well, if you manage to sell your game in China, what's the best pricing model that you should use? Usually, what most developers and publishers do is that they tend to price their games at half of the price that they will do in the West. And of course, they will use RMBs to do so. Another popular trend is that they use prices that tend to end with a 9. So you see like 29 RMBs or 39 RMBs. 12 RMBs is also a very popular price tag. So here you can see some examples. This War of Mine was sold at 29 RMBs. Replica, which was a narrative game that was very successful in China, was sold at 12, as well as Reigns, that was released a month ago officially in China. Well, another question is, should I localize my game to simplified Chinese or to traditional Chinese? And the answer is if you are focusing in mainland China, you should definitely localize your game at least to simplified Chinese. But if you want to also cover other territories of Greater China, like Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, and also the Philippines, you should also try to localize your game to traditional Chinese. This is very important, and I would say that this is like the most important thing that you should consider if you are considering to go into China, like more than the pricing and more of special content for China. Because in China, as well as in other regions, like in Latin America, for example, most people, although they can understand English, they are not so used to speaking and reading and writing in English. So using their languages is very, very important. Something that we are doing at Indienova is we have this initiative called Project Gutenberg, in which we are basically trying to localize as many games, as many Western games as we can for free. And we are doing that completely free and no strings attached. After you have the localization, you can go and sell your game on Steam or in whatever channel you'd like. We have already localized more than 20 games, including Reigns, Oculus, and some other games. Well, the next question is, okay, so once you go through all these process for getting the license number, and once you are ready to sell your game, how can people know about your game? How can you spread the word about your game? So it's basically the same as it happens here in the West using social media channels. The thing is that in China, as you may know, Facebook and Twitter and Google and Twitch are blocked by the government or by their own decision. So what most developers do is that they use WeChat. And WeChat is kind of a mix between WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, payment system. You can like pay all your bills with WeChat. And it's also very good for spreading the word about your game. So you have like longer stories, so you can talk about the event that you're organizing. You can also follow these official accounts, so they can post as they will post news on some other app. And you have also this kind of Instagram or Facebook stream where people, your friends, will post what are the games that they're playing. And this is also very, very important if you want to get your game noticed there. As I mentioned, in China we don't have Twitch, but we have DouYu, which is exactly like Twitch. They even released this feature where viewers can actually buy the games that they are looking at in the stream in the same week as Twitch did here in the West. So though it's very, very big, and because China has such a large amount of people, like most streams of indie games get tens of thousands of viewers, usually. And finally, forums or message boards. One of the most popular message boards for indie games is one called steamcn.com, which is a forum for talking about Steam games that are going to be released in Chinese in China. So we've all heard about the indie apocalypse and that there are lots of games on Steam. I think that there are like 16,000 games right now on Steam, but there are like less than 1,000 games localized to Chinese. So it's a very, very big opportunity, especially for indie developers and also for more experimental developers who wants to get noticed in other territories. Okay, so this was a very quick overview of what's happening now in China, why you should like consider China as a market, but I will be happy to answer more questions. Yeah. I think they have a microphone. Like.
I have a problem. Oh, okay. Yay. Okay, I have two questions. First one is, does educational games fit into this, especially for children? Another one is, I don't know Chinese, so are there people I can hire there to not only localize my game, but also to manage the social part of it? So post stuff in the WeChat, go into forums, talk about the game, stuff like that, and how much could that cost?
Well, for the first question, do you mean that educational games need to pass through the process of getting the license?
And also the types of, do you see educational games in that type of apps, that market apps?
Yeah, well, first of all, yeah, you need to, like every app and every game that wants to be sold in China should get a license. As I mentioned earlier, if you come from the West and you want to publish your game on the App Store right now, you can do it. But probably in the future you won't, so something that you should consider. And the second thing was, if there are companies or people that can help you with PR and marketing, yeah, absolutely. Like there are like some publishers, like indie publishers, that are starting to work on this. So yeah, like you should like just make a Google search and try to find them. And they usually work on a revenue share basis.
My next question is kind of tied to what you just talked about. What are the major indie publishers? For example, in the West, in America, there's Devolver Digital, which publishes, which is kind of like a publishing label for indie games. Is there something like that?
Yeah, that's also starting to grow in China. So we have, well, Indienova, which I'm working there at the moment. But you have also other companies like Another Indie that publish Lost Castle. Something that is also interesting in China is that, unlike in the West, where publishers try to compete with other publishers to publish games from developers, in China you kind of also compete with stores that are also looking for games. So yeah, you can contact directly one of these publishers, or you can try to contact these stores to sell your game. Yeah.
Thanks for the talk. I also heard that Chinese people often have mechanics in their games which are not usually seen in the Western games. And would you recommend, because I heard that this is a good thing to do, to implement some of these mechanics when you port the game to China?
Yeah.
And what are some mechanics as an example you could implement?
Yeah, well, that basically applies if you're thinking on releasing a free-to-play game, for example. Like yesterday, I was talking with a friend here, and I was telling him that in China they use this autoplay feature, and that is a very, very spread in China. So people just go into their work, they push the autoplay button, and they leave their cell phone on the side, and they continue working. So that is one of the features that they usually use. Another feature is that pay to win is not necessarily a bad thing in China. Again, this also applies basically for free-to-play games. But for premium games, we're really open on getting like new games, especially that come from the West and that have a unique art style. So, yeah.
I have a question. In China, how many festivals do you have, and what kind of festivals? And the second question, do you think that a Maze festival could be a fit for China because of this cultural, open-minded festival? And just want to...
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've seen that right now across China, and also especially in the first-year cities, there's this like underground culture that is also starting to appear. So, and at the same time, we have this indie movement that is also starting to grow. So I think that match could definitely help to introduce a festival like a Maze in China. There are not many festivals like a Maze in China right now. Most indie festivals and conferences are more like GDC and PAX maybe. China Joy, for example, is completely different. It's like a kind of an E3 focused on AAA mobile games in China. So there are a couple of indie game festivals that are starting to appear. So we have WePlay in October in Shanghai, and then we have another one that will happen in Guangzhou that will be organized by the same people behind PAX this year. But yeah, like let's bring a Maze to China.
Thank you for the talk. You mentioned WePlay show. Is it a coincidence that the same name as... It's not a coincidence.
No.
Maybe not everyone is aware that Tencent is preparing a platform similar to Steam for China with the same name. So it's not a coincidence.
Yeah, no, they don't have anything to do. So for those who don't know, Tencent, which is the largest gaming company in the world, announced 2 weeks ago that they are going to release a platform called WePlay, which is based on a previous platform called Tencent Gaming Platform. And this is basically a local version of Steam. So they announced that they are going to release that soon, and they announced some of the games that are going to appear here. And that is also one of the reasons why I think that Steam will no longer be so open in China as it has been all these years. So yeah.
Hi. Something that's really big over here is local multiplayer games and board games at the minute. What's the market like for that in China just now?
Well, Overcooked was hugely popular. So yeah, because as I mentioned, streamers are very important for the success of a game, and local multiplayers are usually huge with the streamers. They have a good market. However, as it also happens in the West, if you have a local multiplayer that do not have an online functionality, it will be kind of hard to get the attention from streamers because they will need to find another person or more people to play the game. So yeah, that's an option.
I've heard like there's some no-go in Chinese on the Chinese market. Like for instance, you should never put skeleton in your games because it's not popular there. Do you have other example of such thing? Yeah,
you mentioned they what they shouldn't put in the game.
I don't know if it's a fact, but I've been told like you should never have skeletons in your games, such as like undead creature or something like that, because it's culturally a problem or something.
So if you want to go through the official way and get the license from the government, you won't get it if you have all of those things in your game. So for getting the license, it's a very strict process. So first of all, everything has to be in Chinese. So you can't have even words like start or pause in English. You need to have everything in Chinese. And as you mentioned, yeah, if you have some kind of violence or blood or skeletons, you won't get the license. But however, up to now, you can publish your game with all of those features on Steam and in the App Store. But it doesn't have anything to do with the local taste of Chinese players for games. Yeah.
Hi. Are there local tastes are there things which you actually genuinely should avoid because Chinese players will feel put out, offended, nauseated, confused by them, which Western players will be, yeah, that's fine?
More than things to avoid, there are some things that if you put into your game, they will really welcome. Like, for example, not only having a text-based localization, but also try to localize voice, for example, voice acting. However, if you do the voice acting poorly, it will be worse for your game. There are also like small details or touches like putting attention on some Chinese festivals or holidays, for example. That definitely helps in the sales and also in the attitude that local gamers put on your game.
Unity recently announced that they were working with Xiaomi, I don't know if I spelled that right, and that they were sort of trying to provide the full package, at least for mobile apps. So access to a mobile app store, but also access to the ad market there, and most importantly, that they would cover the licensing problem.
Yeah.
Could you make a guess for someone who's actually a small indie? Does it pay to make the effort to actually try to get the license yourself, or how much effort is it? Or does it make more sense to say, okay, we have to go through a larger partner like Unity or like one of the, if anybody else offers a license through them, simply because we can't afford it?
Yeah, well, first of all, you cannot get the license like by yourself in China unless you have a Chinese company. So you need to go with a partner. In the case of Unity, yes, they announced that they are going to make this partnership with Xiaomi, which is one of the largest phone makers. Well, they make all kinds of stuff right now. And they have this app store that is very popular in China, but is like just one in hundreds. So they haven't released like the official details of how's this happening. I don't know if you get the license, they will only publish your game in this app store, and you won't be able to release the game in these other app stores. So we don't know yet. But yeah, if you want to get a license number from China, you need to be either a Chinese company or do it with a partner. Yeah. Okay, well, thanks. And if you have any other questions, I will be around.